As I have mentioned in relation to some of the other stained glass windows here at St. Andrews, it can be both interesting and actually quite helpful to pay attention to the details that have been included in these beautiful stained glass windows. There are times when paying close attention to those details helps us to better understand something about the person's life who is being commemorated, but there are also times when paying attention to the details of a person's life, or at least what we can learn about them, can actually help us to understand and even to notice details that we might otherwise overlook. Such is the case, I believe, with this window, located in the upper part of the gallery at St. Andrews on the west or Simcoe Street side of the church sanctuary, and which was dedicated and installed in memory of a man who died in 1935 by the name of Richard Scougal Cassels. The window was installed in 1942. So who was Richard Scougal Cassels, and how does knowing something about his life help us to notice and see details that we might otherwise overlook in this window? Richard Scougal Cassels was born on October the 5th, 1859 in Quebec. He graduated from the University of Toronto and attended Osgoode Hall Law School, from which he graduated in 1883. As well as being a lawyer, Richard was also a member of the military, serving as a lieutenant with the Queen's Own Rifles, with which he served in the Northwest Field Force during the Northwest Rebellion or Northwest Resistance in 1885. A diary of his experiences is available, and it's actually quite an interesting read. Having been trained as a lawyer, Richard and his brother Hamilton became the founding partners in Cassels and Cassels law firm in downtown Toronto in 1888. The firm still exists and is now known as Cassels, Brock and Blackwell, or sometimes simply as Cassels. In October 1886, Richard retired from the Queen's Own Rifles, and in January 1892, because of his legal background and his military experience, Cassels was asked to provide legal help and counsel with the formation of the 48th Highlander Regiment, which had started the process of forming that regiment in 1891. As such, not only was Cassels instrumental in the founding of the 48th Highlanders, but was actually made a company commander and designated a captain shortly after being asked to provide that legal counsel. The 48th Highlanders have had and continue to have a regimental connection with St. Andrew's Church since the regiment's earliest days. In the bottom part of the window, there's a family crest and motto, Avis la fin, which means consider the end. This is the motto of the Kennedy clan, which is of which the Cassels family is a part. But there are other details in that lower portion of the window that are actually even more interesting. That is, in reading more about Cassels' life, there was one of those small details that actually helps us to notice a few things in this window that we might otherwise overlook. That is, it was interesting to learn that in addition to Cassels' experiences as a soldier and as a lawyer, he was also an avid amateur photographer with a particular interest in local wildlife and botany and wildflowers. This interest was so significant that it was actually referenced in the prayer that was offered by the Reverend Stuart Parker on the occasion of the dedication of this window, which took place, as I mentioned, in 1942. Parker's handwritten notes for the prayer gave thanks, and I quote, "for his devotion to clean and simple things, and the joy he found in the humblest flowers of the field, seeing all that thy hand hath made, as thou thyself didst see it in the dawn of creation to be very good." Cassels' interest in photographing wildflowers had actually involved taking the photographs that were included and published in 1930 in a book entitled Some Familiar Wildflowers, which was written by J.E. Jones. Upon Cassels' death on July 17, 1935, his slides and photographs of wildflowers and other botanical specimens were actually left to the botany department at the University of Toronto. When I came across that little detail, I was interested to see if I could find a copy of Some Familiar Wildflowers, and I ended up taking a trip up to the Thomas Fisher Rare Book Library, which is on the University of Toronto campus and is located in the building that houses Robarts Library. The Fisher Rare Book Library is actually open to the public and is worth a visit. It's quite fascinating. This is a picture of the book that Cassels' photographs are found in. It was interesting to look through the text and see some of the pictures that he took to illustrate the variety and beauty of those familiar wildflowers. I don't think that I'm imagining things in suggesting that some of the pictures in that book bear a significant resemblance to some of the wildflowers that are included in the stained glass window at St. Andrew's Church. There are, in many windows, small decorative flourishes and details that enhance the look of the windows, but there seems to be very little doubt that the inclusion of images of these wildflowers in this window was quite intentional, and it's actually really quite lovely. As such, these flowers are more than just decorations in this window. They are a tribute and a reflection of one of Richard School Cassels' great interests and passions, and I think were quite intentionally included in that window in remembrance of him. Which reminds us that the images that are found in the rest of the window are just as intentional. In one historical document, this window is referred to as Christ Blessing the Faithful. And though I don't know if that title was the official name of the window or simply a description of it, it offers a pretty decent summary of the meaning of this window. That is, in the upper part of the window is the image of Christ with a crown on his head, standing over and shining the light of blessing on a person who's visiting and caring for another person who's in a time of need. Arching over that scene are words drawn from the famous passage in Matthew 25, where an apocalyptic king, the Son of Man, stands in judgment on the peoples of the world. When the faithful had fed the hungry, clothed the naked, welcomed the stranger, cared for the sick, visited the imprisoned, it was as if they were offering those acts of kindness and servanthood to Christ himself. In Matthew 25, and in this window, we read, "Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me." Although it's not entirely clear of the exact nature of the crisis that the person in the window is experiencing, the window in the background does in fact look like it's covered with prison bars. As such, perhaps this window was celebrating the work of a lawyer who had at times used his legal training to visit the imprisoned or to care for those who had no other advocates. I was in prison and you visited me. The sentiment was echoed in the same prayer of Reverend Stuart Parker, who, when the window was dedicated, stated, "We thank thee for the memory and example he," that is Richard School Cassels, "has left to us, of brotherly kindness to the downtrodden and distressed, of pity and passion to lift up those broken and bruised under whatsoever burdens and circumstances." In any case, the upper part of the window and Parker's prayer attest to the fact that Cassels had demonstrated in his life an exemplary care for those in need. And the other prominent image in the window similarly celebrates a scene of exemplary faith. The scene is based on an event that was recounted in both Matthew and Luke, in which Jesus commends the faith that he had witnessed in the words and actions of a Roman centurion, a soldier, who was seeking Jesus' help on behalf of a servant in the centurion's household. Jesus offered to come to the centurion's house to provide help, but the soldier stated that he didn't need Jesus to do so, as he knew that the power and authority that Jesus possessed was sufficient to cure and heal the servant by simply saying the word. In both Matthew and Luke, the centurion, that soldier, though a Gentile and a Roman, was commended by Jesus for having a faith so significant that rarely had Jesus encountered such faith in anyone. I say unto you that I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. As such, this window, dedicated to a man who was known for his care for the distressed and downtrodden, and who had served as a soldier, is decorated not only with images representing those two commendable aspects of his life and faith, but also with images of the wildflowers that he had so deeply admired and enjoyed. And so, in honor of this lawyer, this soldier, this lover of nature, this husband, this father, this good and faithful man, his family dedicated this window to the glory of God and in loving memory of Richard School Cassels.